Welcome to your Health Facts, everyone. Today we're gonna be looking at the connection between weight loss and overall health, and we're also gonna be talking about the role of mitochondria. A lot of people,
Mhm.
when they think about losing weight, they just focus on cutting calories. But it's really important to make smart dietary choices if you want to see lasting results. It's not just about the number you see on the scale. Muscle mass is super important for healthy metabolism. And did you know that even a short illness can cause you to lose a significant amount of muscle mass? Like imagine spending just a week in intensive care. You could lose 15% of your muscle mass. And that's a really serious issue. It really highlights how important it is to build and maintain that metabolically active tissue. So now let's talk about those tiny powerhouses inside our cells called mitochondria. These little organelles are responsible for producing energy in every single cell in your body, from your brain all the way to your skin. Now, children, they have the healthiest mitochondria. But as we get older, environmental toxins and the choices we make about our diet can actually damage them over time. And that leads to a slower metabolism, and you guessed it, weight gain. Now, here's something interesting. The rise in obesity over the past 50 years kind of coincides with the increased use of high fructose corn syrup in processed foods. And fructose, well, it acts as a mitochondrial toxin, depleting cellular energy, increasing uric acid production, and even messing with nitric oxide production. And all of this ultimately leads to inflammation and contributes to something called metabolic syndrome. And that's a group of conditions that includes obesity, high blood pressure, and insulin resistance. And to make matters worse, fructose doesn't trigger those hormones that tell us we're full, like leptin. And that leads to a vicious cycle of overeating and even more weight gain. Now, it's really important to understand that the fructose found in whole fruits is different from the concentrated fructose added to processed foods and those so-called natural sweeteners. The fiber, the water content, and the antioxidants in whole fruits, well, they slow down how our body absorbs fructose. And that allows the good bacteria in our gut to metabolize it without those negative effects we talked about. But those added sugars, they're hiding everywhere in our morning coffee, in ketchup, and they directly harm our mitochondria. Alcohol is a lot like fructose in terms of its impact on our mitochondria and our metabolism. Both of them are processed mainly in the liver, and they skip over some important regulatory steps. And that can lead to uncontrolled fat production. Just think about the typical American diet. High in calories, full of refined carbs, and let's be honest, often includes alcohol. And on top of all that, we often don't get enough movement. This is actually really similar to the diet of sumo wrestlers, which, as you might guess, is designed to make them gain weight. Now compare that to the traditional Japanese way of eating. They focus on eating until they're about 75% full, and they really prioritize whole, fresh, plant-based foods. This way of eating is all about minimizing those mitochondrial toxins and really focusing on overall health.
So let's dive into the 10 major mitochondrial toxins that you should be aware of. These are the things that can really hinder your weight loss journey and impact your overall well-being. We're talking about things like saturated fat, chronic stress, processed foods, even nutrient deficiencies, and of course, inflammation. And don't forget about environmental toxins and pollutants, especially heavy metals. These things can really mess with your mitochondria. Oh, and we can't forget about sleep deprivation, insulin resistance, and just a general lack of movement. All of those contribute too. And finally, we need to talk about gut health. When your gut isn't happy, it can throw your whole system off balance. And a lot of that comes from those low fiber processed foods and the overuse of antibiotics. They disrupt that delicate balance of our gut microbiome, and that can definitely impact mitochondrial health. To really see how our food choices affect mitochondrial health, let's compare a bowl of white rice to a bowl of quinoa, buckwheat, and oat groats. Okay. Now, both give us carbs, right? But those grains, the quinoa, the buckwheat, and the oats, they're packed with fiber and micronutrients, and those are essential for our mitochondria to work properly. Whole grains, they have antioxidants. And those antioxidants, particularly polyphenols, well, they're found in the fiber, and they actually help repair our mitochondria. Plus, whole grains are good for digestion and metabolism, even if you have insulin resistance. And they're good for our gut microbiome, too. They reduce inflammation and help keep things moving, if you know what I mean. Now, it's important to remember that glucose, the kind we get from starch, it's not a mitochondrial toxin in itself. It's all those other things we talked about. The fructose, the saturated fat, the heavy metals, not getting enough exercise, and not sleeping well. Those are the real troublemakers for our mitochondria. When we eat whole grains, our bodies break down those complex carbs into glucose slowly, and this slow release helps keep our blood sugar levels stable. It gives us energy without overwhelming our mitochondria. Now, let's talk about insulin. It's a key hormone for managing our weight. You see, people with type 1 diabetes, they can't produce insulin. and they often have a hard time gaining weight. This shows just how important insulin is for our metabolism and how much it affects our weight. The discovery of insulin was a game changer for people with type 1 diabetes. Back in 1922, there was this 14-year-old boy named Leonard Thompson. He had severe type 1 diabetes, and he became the very first person to receive insulin injections. Before insulin, he only weighed 65 pounds. He was basically on a starvation diet just to try to manage his diabetes. The starvation diet, it was kind of like a ketogenic diet in a way. It lowered blood glucose for a bit, but it left people malnourished and really weak. They cut out almost all carbs, which forced their bodies into ketosis. That means the body starts using fat for energy. And as a byproduct, it creates these things called ketone bodies. Now, ketosis can be helpful in some cases, but when you don't have enough insulin, the ketone production can get out of control, and that can lead to ketoacidosis, which is a really dangerous condition.
Yet, insulin is really important for regulating the production of ketones. If you don't have enough insulin, those ketones build up in your blood, and that can cause your blood pH to drop, which is really serious. This is what we call diabetic ketoacidosis. It's a dangerous complication of type 1 diabetes. It comes with some pretty scary symptoms: nausea, vomiting, stomach pain, rapid breathing. Even your breath might smell fruity, and you can get confused. And if it's not treated, it can lead to some really bad things: dehydration, organ failure, coma, even death. It's important to remember that this is different from nutritional ketosis, which is a controlled and much safer process. You get that through a low-carb diet. Diabetic ketoacidosis is a medical emergency. You need to get treatment right away: insulin, fluids, and electrolytes. Before insulin was widely available, the only option for people with type 1 diabetes was that starvation diet. It could help people live a little longer, but it often left them incredibly malnourished and weak. It was like a really extreme ketogenic diet because they were basically cutting out all carbs. But this wasn't a sustainable way to live, especially for children. They would become emaciated and very vulnerable to infections. They just weren't getting the nutrients and calories they needed to stay healthy. When insulin was discovered and could be mass-produced, it was a huge turning point for people with type 1 diabetes. For those who couldn't produce their own insulin, it was a lifeline. It allowed them to gain weight and live longer, healthier lives. Insulin is absolutely essential for regulating blood sugar and making sure our bodies can use glucose for energy. Without insulin, the body just can't process glucose properly, and that leads to all sorts of health problems. So for people with type 1 diabetes, managing their condition well means carefully balancing their insulin intake with their diet and lifestyle. They really need to work closely with their healthcare providers to figure out the right insulin dosage and keep their blood sugar levels stable. But even with insulin therapy, it's still super important for people with type 1 diabetes to maintain a healthy lifestyle. Eating a balanced diet, getting regular exercise, and keeping a close eye on their blood sugar levels are all essential parts of long-term management. Okay, so let's go back to how our food choices affect mitochondrial health. Remember, those tiny powerhouses inside our cells are the ones producing all our energy. And what we choose to eat can have a big impact on how well they function. And ultimately, that affects our overall well-being. Let's go back to that example of white rice versus quinoa, buckwheat, and oat groats. All of those are carbs, but those grains, the quinoa, buckwheat, and oats, they're just packed with fiber and micronutrients. And those are really important for healthy mitochondria. White rice, it's a staple food in many cultures, but it doesn't have the same amount of fiber and nutrients as those whole grains. Refined grains, like white rice, they've had their bran and germ removed, and that's where a lot of the good stuff is. Whole grains, on the other hand, they're full of fiber, antioxidants, vitamins, and minerals. And all those nutrients play a key role in keeping our mitochondria working well, reducing inflammation, and making sure our metabolism runs smoothly. The fiber in whole grains is also great for our digestion. It slows down how quickly our bodies absorb sugars, and that prevents those sudden spikes in blood glucose. And this is especially important for people with insulin resistance because it helps them manage their blood sugar. Plus, the antioxidants in whole grains, especially those polyphenols, they protect our mitochondria from damage caused by free radicals. Free radicals are these unstable molecules that can harm our cells and lead to all sorts of health problems. So, by adding whole grains to our diet, we're basically giving our bodies the tools they need to keep our mitochondria healthy and running strong. It's a simple change, but it can make a real difference in how our metabolism works and in lowering our risk for chronic diseases.
And just to be clear, glucose, the kind that comes from starch, it's not a mitochondrial toxin. It's those other things we've been talking about: the fructose, the saturated fat, the heavy metals, not moving enough, and not getting enough sleep. Those are the things that really mess with our mitochondria. When you eat whole grains, your body breaks those complex carbs down into glucose nice and slow. And this gradual release helps keep your blood sugar stable and provides you with sustained energy without putting too much stress on your mitochondria. The fiber in whole grains is also amazing for your gut microbiome. All those trillions of bacteria living in your gut. They play a huge role in your digestion, your immune system, and your overall health. When you eat foods rich in fiber, your gut bacteria ferment that fiber and produce short chain fatty acids. And these short chain fatty acids, they're like little superheroes for your health. They reduce inflammation, improve how your body responds to insulin, and just generally make your gut a happier place. A healthy gut microbiome is essential for your body to absorb nutrients properly and for your metabolism to function optimally. So, by feeding your good gut bacteria with fiber from whole grains, you're indirectly helping your mitochondria and boosting your overall well-being. Remember those sumo wrestlers we talked about? Their diet, which is designed to make them gain weight, is all about tons of calories, refined carbs, alcohol, and not a lot of movement. Now, that might work for them, but for most people, it's a recipe for mitochondrial disaster. The traditional Japanese way of eating is very different. They focus on stopping when they feel about 75% full, and they prioritize whole, fresh, plant-based foods. This way of eating encourages mindfulness, nutrient-dense meals, and minimizing those mitochondrial toxins. If we try to adopt a similar approach, we can support our mitochondrial health, maintain a healthy weight, and lower our risk of developing chronic diseases. It's all about making conscious food choices that nourish our bodies from the inside out.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground today, haven't we? We've been exploring this really complex relationship between losing weight, our overall health, and those really important mitochondria. And it's pretty clear that if you want to manage your weight successfully and keep it off, it takes more than just counting calories. It's about really making smart choices about what we eat, choosing foods that are packed with nutrients, like those whole foods we talked about, and really trying to avoid those things that can harm our mitochondria. By understanding how all of these factors can affect how our metabolism works, we can really take control of our health, and feel better overall. It's not about, depriving ourselves or following some crazy strict diet. It's about making changes to our lifestyle that we can stick with, changes that support our metabolism and help us feel good. So let's think back to those 10 mitochondrial toxins we talked about.
We really need to pay attention to how much saturated fat, processed foods, environmental toxins, and added sugars we're taking in. And we got to make sure we're getting enough sleep, managing our stress levels, and moving our bodies regularly. All those things matter. Feeding our bodies with nutrient-rich whole foods, especially those that are high in fiber and antioxidants, can really make a huge difference in how well our mitochondria function. And that's key for managing our weight in a healthy way. And don't forget about that gut microbiome. It's super important. We can help it thrive by eating fermented foods, prebiotics, and probiotics. And a healthy gut means a healthier you all around. Knowledge is power, right? When we understand the science behind how our bodies work, like how those tiny mitochondria play such a big role in weight loss, we can make smarter choices that will help us reach our health goals. If you want to dive even deeper into all of this, we've got a ton of great information and resources on mitochondrial health and weight management over at yourhealthfacts.com. So check it out. Thanks for joining us today as we explore this fascinating world of weight loss and the amazing power of those tiny but mighty mitochondria.